where, I mean, some of the evidence we have heard, in my view, is unlawful. A child being tethered to a fence, another one being his arms tied to a chair, and those types of scenarios are totally unacceptable. And whatever motion we're going to support has to bring clarity to this issue, so that teachers know when it is and isn't acceptable to use any sort of restrictive practice or physical restraint.
Deputy Chair Peter, you'd indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah. Look, there's not much I would disagree with either, except obviously our amendment does keep in 4.1c, but reiterates a lot of the points that you've made, that restraint should only be used as a measure of last resort, should never be used as punishment, or to make a child behave, and never deliberately cause pain or injury to a child. In terms of the NITC correspondence that we've received in, I think they're right in what concerns they have raised. Certainly their bullet point 1, the NITC is concerned that teachers do require legal protection, and I think and they give the example here, where the teacher believes that a pupil should be physically moved from a room to prevent them from inciting another pupil. An example they give is one pupil using racist language to another pupil. Now, that doesn't fall into 4.1a or 4.1b, where it's actually protection of property or protection of the individual from physical harm. It does very neatly fit into 4.1c, and for those reasons, obviously, we would be asking committee to support our amendment, which does not ask for the removal of 4.1c, but does reiterate that, as the Deputy Chair said, and you alluded to, Chair, that it should only be used as a method of last resort in a classroom setting, but does provide the protection for teachers that I think they require.
No, thank you, Peter. I suppose I would just emphasise again my point that my expectation and my intent behind proposing the motion as drafted was really the view that the statutory guidance on restrictive practice will provide that clarity, and that's what we needed to do. It seems at the minute we've potentially got two things that could be working against each other. A direction of travel to eliminate all restrictive practice, or to reduce it as far as is possible, and then an article that permits it. It's that conflict between those two things that I think is perhaps holding up the process, and that the motion as drafted may help bring a debate to the floor that could perhaps bring some clarity on that issue. Any other members want to come in at this stage? No. So I think no other indication. So I suppose it really is decision time for the committee, and it's whether or not we want to proceed with the motion as drafted, the motion as amended, or some other course of action. I'm certainly happy to propose that we do go ahead with the motion as drafted. I think it's important we clearly note the concerns from the NITC, and I think in any debate it would be absolutely essential that we reflect those and ensure that it's clear what we're asking for is actually clarity for teachers, quite the opposite of wanting to do anything that would muddy the waters. So that's my view, but it's for our members to decide. So, Peter, you've made your point clear. You wouldn't be supporting the motion.
We'd be opposing your motion, obviously, because we have an amendment in, and as I said before, Chair, without reiterating the arguments, we believe that teachers do require that legal protection. The NITC have underpinned that, but we do also believe, again, echoing the comments that the Deputy Chair made, that there have been some horrendous cases. We're not talking about those horrendous cases. We're talking about this being applied as a measure of last resort, and a good example has been given at the NITC about where that is needed in order to give teachers power and protection to try and prevent legal action against individuals.
Well, in terms of procedure to take this forward, I think the first thing to do would be to deal with the amendment first, in terms of whether there is support for that. So if I ask you, Clerk, if you want to conduct a vote, it does appear we're going to divide on this matter, and obviously if there is an alternative proposal other than the motion drafted, welcome to hear that as well. But
Okay, I can read it all into the record. Just the main, the motion as drafted is that this Assembly acknowledges the painful ongoing debate and campaign for minimisation, if not eradication, of restrictive practices in schools and other education settings, applauds parents for bravely bringing this subject to the awareness of the Assembly and the public, commends the efforts of DA, DOH and partners in working to establish guidance for youth in both health and education settings, calls on the Minister of Education to commit first to guidance and training that is non-discriminatory, person-centred and in the best interests of the child, i.e. from a human rights perspective. Secondly, to repeal of Article 41C of the Education Northern Ireland Order 1998 and appropriate legislative change to respond compassionately to the difficult circumstances which can arise due to pupils' challenging behaviours. Thirdly, to data gathering and monitoring. Fourthly, to review of the special school and wider school estate to address the environmental factors which exacerbate distressed and acting out behaviours by pupils, and to commission an update to the 2013 ETI report on persistent and challenging behaviours in special schools, and urges the Minister in so doing to provide a safe school environment in which the human rights of everyone in the school community are respected and avoidable harm liability is not a concern. The proposed amendment by Peter Martin then inserts some text. So if you look at where secondly falls in the draft motion, deleting all of that and inserting just before thirdly, to reiterate the guidance underpinning the exceptional character of Article 41C of the Education Northern Ireland Order 1998 found in DE Circular number 2021/13, which states that restraint should only be used as a measure of last resort to preserve the dignity and respect of all concerned. It should never be used as a form of punishment or to make a child behave, and never deliberately cause pain or injury to a pupil. All instances of the use of reasonable force or restraint should be recorded. Parents and carers should be informed and follow-up support provided to the pupil and staff involved. So the committee is going to vote first of all on the amendment proposed by Peter, which refers to the current guidance and not to repeal of Article 41C.
Okay, so could anyone in favour of the amendment say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone who is not in favour, no? No. Okay, so the amendment has fallen there. We're not going to be taking that forward. In terms of the motion as drafted, I just want to check first that there's no alternative proposal from anyone else, or if it is the motion as drafted. No alternative proposal. I would want to just suggest to and here in the motion read back, I think, to reflect the response from the Special School Strategic Leadership Group, to remove that word bravely, which they seem to object to, as they felt that it created an adversarial a relationship between schools and parents, which I have no interest in creating. So I would be wanted to suggest that is removed, and also I would perhaps suggest that rather than the use of the phrase acting out, that perhaps dysregulated behaviour may better reflect the context that we're dealing with. But subject to those changes, can I just seek a view from the committee as to who is in support of that motion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no.
No.
So that is the motion then that is going forward based on that vote, and we'll take that forward for submission to the Business Office. Okay, thank you, members. So that then takes us on to item 5, and that is the draft minutes. So we have the draft minutes, first of all, of the Education Committee meeting of the 3rd of June 2025 at page 10. Can I get members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And also then we have the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 4th of June 2025 at page 15. And can I get members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so that moves us right on time to item 6 on the agenda, which is our oral evidence session today, which is being provided by the Women's Support Network. And I understand that the witness will be joining by Zoom, so if we can just leave that to get set up. So in the first instance, it's a briefing on the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill provided by the Women's Support Network, and I would refer members to the Clerk's cover note at page 22 and the Women's Regional Consortium response to the Department of Education School Uniform Policy consultation at page 25. So joining us today we have Siobhan Harding, hopefully she'll be online in just a moment, who is Policy Officer for the Women's Support Network. So we're just waiting for the tech to do its job. There we are. Good afternoon, Siobhan. Thank you for joining us. Can I just check first of all, you've got the audio coming through okay at your end?
Yes, I can hear you, thanks.
No, that's great. So thank you very much for giving your time to brief committee on this and provide your evidence. So this really is the opportunity for you to provide your organisation's perspective on the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill. I'd certainly be happy to invite you for any opening remarks here, up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer from members. So thank you for joining us, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. And my thanks to Mark at the committee for facilitating me to present via Zoom as well. At the outset, I want to say that we welcome this bill and that it provides a starting point in trying to address the issues of expensive school uniform, which is having such an impact on women, children and families. We welcome the focus on affordability, consultation and review, and that the Minister has said his focus is on making an impact for families most in need. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Women's Regional Consortium, which is a consortium of 7 women's sectors organisations who represent the views and experiences of women living in disadvantaged and rural areas of Northern Ireland. In 2023, we published a major piece of research with Ulster University on the impact of the cost of living crisis on women, where we spoke to 250 women across Northern Ireland. For those women who were parents, the cost of school uniform came up time and time again, so cost will be the focus of my contribution today. In fact, the cost of school uniforms comes up at focus group sessions, even when they're not specific to this issue. So, for example, last week I was speaking to a group of women about the government's Pathways to Work green paper, and the cost of school uniforms was raised there too, which is just an indication of how much of a pressure this is. It's clear from our research that the cost of school uniforms is a major issue and places a huge burden on women and families, most especially for those on the lowest incomes, those depending on social security benefits and those in low paid work. Save the Children Northern Ireland polling shows that 6 in 10 parents find the cost of school uniforms and PE kit financially challenging, but that rises to 73% for low-income families. The cost issues described to us include, as you've heard from other contributors, the cost of branded items, of expensive blazers, of PE kit, the cost of school shoes, and the cost of additional items like school bags. We believe that this is more often than not a gendered issue, with school uniform costs impacting more on women who are more likely to bear the responsibility for children's costs. We hear from women throughout the year about the cost of school uniforms. It really is a constant worry for women. Replacing school shoes, shirts, trousers, items of PE kit, where children grow out of them or lose them, and when they need replaced due to wear and tear. We particularly hear about school uniform issues now and into the summer months, where the burden is most acute, and women are worrying how they're going to save the necessary money to avoid the costs, to afford the costs of uniform. I can't stress enough how much this contributes to anxiety levels for these women who are already struggling with insufficient income to afford the basics. This is in an environment where many of these parents are facing into their 3rd summer, having seen the loss of the holiday hunger scheme, which helped them to at least meet the cost of food over the summer holiday period. A rapid response report from a number of academics detailing the consequences of cuts to education for children and young people states that the removal of or deep cuts to schemes such as those to eliminate holiday hunger, period poverty, and the high costs of school uniforms have a cumulative effect on groups who are already disadvantaged in terms of their experience of education provision. In the women's sector, we often refer to women as being the shock absorbers of poverty in the home, going without food and heat to ensure their children have what they need, including for school uniforms. The phrase choosing between heating and eating has been used a lot since the cost of living crisis and maybe has lost a bit of its impact. But this is the reality of many women's lives, as evidenced by this quote from our research. I have 3 kids in the house. I'm always going without to make sure they have what they need. The little one needs new school shoes, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for them. There is nowhere to take the money from. He needs them, so this week I'll cut back on gas and not do a full shop so that I can save money for his shoes. The Women's Regional Consortium is also concerned about the potential for rising debt levels as a result of increases in the cost of living and a struggle to make ends meet, particularly for those on the lowest incomes. We're concerned that for school uniforms, some women may have to resort to borrowing, and in some cases, this may be very expensive, adding to their financial problems. As one woman told us in our cost of living research, I had to use a credit card for the kids' school uniform this year. I struggled to pay it worse this year than any time before. The grant for a school uniform doesn't go anywhere near the actual costs. Then we are in the unenviable position of having extremely dangerous lenders like paramilitaries who operate particularly in more deprived communities. For some of these women who are outside some of the cheaper forms of borrowing because they have poor credit histories or low incomes, they are particularly vulnerable to this type of lending. Research by Ulster University has also found that universal credit was repeatedly described as a driver for illegal lending. We do not believe that it is right that parents and families are getting into debt to pay for the cost of school uniforms. Polling by Save the Children in Northern Ireland shows that 1 in 3 parents have had to borrow money to cover the cost of school uniforms and PE kits, and that 88% of the public don't believe that parents should experience debt to pay for uniforms. To conclude, we welcome this legislation and putting guidance on a statutory footing, but we would like to see an embedded price cap to ensure that costs are kept to a minimum and that they do not place an unnecessary burden on parents and children, which takes advantage of the limited budgets of families, particularly in these difficult economic times. And I'm just going to finish with the case study from a mum I spoke to about the pressure of school uniform costs yesterday. She has 6 children, ranging from 8 months old, so no school uniform there yet, and the oldest is 14, so 5 of her children are currently in school, 3 at primary school and 2 at high school. She is a single parent in receipt of universal credit, and she is subject to the 2-child limit, so she is only getting her help for her oldest 2 children through universal credit. One of her children has been diagnosed with autism and 2 are on the waiting list to be assessed for ADHD. She is struggling to meet her essential bills and having to use a food bank regularly. For her children at primary school, the school requires a branded cardigan at £15 and a branded t-shirt at £9. She has refused to buy these due to cost, despite repeated requests from the school principal for her to get the branded items. She said she simply can't afford it when she can get a 2-pack of plain cardigans for around £6. She said, I don't know how many times I've said to the principal that my kid's uniform is exactly the same. It just doesn't have a badge on it. It doesn't affect their education in any way, and I just can't afford it. For high school, her children are required to have a branded blazer costing £75 and a branded jumper costing £28. The trousers and skirts have to be bought from one of either 2 shops, as they have to be the proper ones, with the school skirt costing £26. There is no cheaper option allowed. For the PE kit, they are required to have a branded polo shirt and a branded quarter zip from Podium Sports. There is a skirt for the girls, but her daughters refuse to wear it as it is too short, but they are permitted to wear plain black tracksuit bottoms. The school has a separate summer PE kit and a winter PE kit, but this mum can't afford two separate ones. She does get the school uniform grant, but it doesn't cover the cost of a school blazer. She struggles with the cost of school shoes and school bags too. Then she is asked to contribute to school funds, money for home economics, money for breaks and school buses, and there's no help with any of that. She said about shoes, for my primary school children, I had to buy 6 pairs of shoes between September and Christmas. The school principal said to me the other day about the state of my daughter's school shoes, but I'm not buying anything now. I can't afford to, and if I did, they wouldn't fit her by September. She also talked about having to buy cheaper shoes to be able to afford them, but they don't last the same. She normally buys the kids' school uniform in August, but borrows money to do this, normally from her parents, though she did say they don't always have it to give to her. She then pays them back in instalments. The primary school provides a uniform swap, but there was a very small selection last year, and her high school doesn't provide one at all. I asked her what would really help her in relation to school uniforms, and she said less branded items, keeping school uniform prices down, and an increase in the school uniform grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And look, that's pretty sort of stark evidence there, setting out the impact of highly inflated school uniform costs on parents. I suppose I'd just start with a question. I suppose your evidence has largely confirmed this, but it's really just to get that clarity. There has been some evidence heard from the committee that suggested maybe there wasn't a need for legislation, that schools manage this effectively. Seems pretty clear from your evidence that's not what you're hearing from the women that you're engaging with.
No, it's not. There's so much feedback from the women, particularly in relation to the cost issue, and so it's clear that the guidelines while they exist are not being paid enough regard to by certain schools. And yes, there's considerable evidence from the women that we speak to, across Northern Ireland about the expense of school uniforms.
So clearly then you would welcome the approach being taken, that the guidelines that when they're produced that schools must adhere to them. That's something your organisation would welcome.
Yes, we very much support that being put on a statutory basis. There is a need, for that to be, more rigorous and more robust in terms of schools following the guidance, because while it exists at the minute, there's clear evidence that a lot of schools are not following it.
Okay. Thank you. So one other really quick question just on some other evidence we've heard, and then onto maybe some of the more specifics around cost. One of the things we heard, we had Parenting Focus in, and a couple of other witnesses have highlighted this, that the legislation as drafted doesn't create any sort of mandatory requirement that schools must consult with parents when they're looking at at a revised uniform policy or when setting their policy. Again, is that something in terms of the women that you're engaging with through your organisation that would be welcomed if that was if there's a requirement was put in there? The committee's certainly looking at that schools have to meaningfully engage with parents when they're setting these policies.
Yes, very much so. I think that it's really important that level of engagement happens both with parents and with pupils as well, because it gives a real understanding of the communities that the schools belong to and the situations that many families find themselves in. Just in speaking to the mother that I spoke to yesterday, that she obviously lives in a community where there are quite high levels of deprivation, and it's important for the school to understand that that's the pressures that parents are facing, and to really be clear that within the community the level of need that exists and the level of pressure that parents are under. I think some schools do that really well, and others don't do it so well.
No, that's fine. So just only one other question for me, and then I'll open up to other members. So if you were able to make any changes to this bill to make it more effective, what would you propose?
We would like to see that the price cap embedded in it, because we feel like that it needs to be much more robust. The guidelines need to be much stronger so that it ensures that schools pay more than just due regard to affordability. So rather than just giving it kind of a glance, that they're much more mandated to stay within the requirements of the legislation. So we'd like to see it stronger around the need for an embedded price cap to keep prices lower.
Thank you, Siobhan. Okay, I'll pass over to the Deputy Chair and then open up to...
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your evidence, Siobhan. And just on that last point about a price cap, I mean, some of us have looked at that and we've discussed it with the Bills Office, and there are some complications with that in terms of, if you set a price cap, are you setting a target, or what happens if inflation is particularly high, or, all of those issues. And an alternative that has been suggested is that there would be a cap on the number of branded items. And you mentioned that yourself in your evidence of the mother who bought unbranded items, rather than buying the jumper, and there was another item as well. How would you feel about that?
Yes, I think it's something that is brought up time and time again. We talk to women about this issue is the number of branded items that are involved in school uniform, and obviously if those are reduced considerably, that will considerably reduce the cost. So yes, I appreciate what you're saying about the price cap in terms of it being a kind of a race to the maximum of the cap. So yes, I mean, I think that there's scope for tackling this on several levels. So we could have a price cap and a reduction in the number of branded items as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but there's one school in County Armagh, formerly Brownlow Integrated College. It's now rebranding as Craigavon Integrated College, and they have designed a complete new uniform, which does away with the blazers. Instead, the young people in the school can wear leggings, track bottoms, and a polo top, a half zip, and a branded puffer jacket. And the principal of the school says that uniform, and they have priced it, will actually come in under the price under the value of the uniform grant. So I'm wondering if you think there's a need for a rethink in terms of what a school uniform looks like.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think that there's so much emphasis on who has what in schools and who is able to afford certain pieces of uniform, when it makes no difference to the child's learning, but can obviously restrict to their opportunities. So I do think that and there is widespread support for generic school uniform, plainer items like you've described there. So I do think there is a need for a rethink around it. It doesn't matter really whether the child has a badge on their blazer or jumper or any other items. It makes no difference to their learning whatsoever. It's about their comfort during the school day, providing them with the right conditions in which to learn and to take opportunities that are afforded through the school.
Okay, thanks for that, Siobhan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Danny, you've indicated, and if any other members want to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Siobhan, thank you. And you highlighted many of the other additional costs to education in your presentation here, and I just take the opportunity to talk about ending holiday hunger. It's a private member's bill that I'm bringing forward because the Minister won't, quite simply. And I just wanted to hear how much obstacles are families facing when it comes to education, because the uniforms is only one part of it, but they make it all affordable for everybody.
Yes, and I responded to your private member's bill on behalf of the Women's Regional Consortium. So yes, I mean that issue of the impact of the loss of the holiday hunger payments has been quite substantial, I think, for a lot of the women that we speak to. We hear all the time about the struggle to afford food and heat. And if women are then diverting money towards school uniform, which they have to have, then it has to come from somewhere. And what they're doing is taking it from their own ability to eat and heat their homes. And that obviously has implications for them, and it has implications for their children and families. So, the money has to be found somewhere, and if there's nowhere else to go, then it's taken from those household budgets, or it goes on debt. And that is a particularly worrying aspect, as I outlined to you. So it's an enormous pressure, not just on the household budgets, but on the women themselves, women and families. That the levels of anxiety that it causes, the stress year on year about affording uniform, especially at this time of year, it's something we hear hear all the time.
And Siobhan, another wee point that we have heard in evidence would be some of the schools in the design, particularly around their blazers, different designs for girls than boys, and families not being able to maybe hand down a blazer. And I just wondered, is that something that you would hear much from families around that, or even like for schools, the recycling of uniforms?
We have heard a few of the women talk about things like the need for, sometimes schools have separate blazers for, once you get a certain age, or if you're doing specific things like music and stuff like that. So sometimes there are requirements around that. So we have heard examples of that, not really widespread, but there have been examples, and that causes issues, obviously, for passing the uniform down. In terms of the swaps and things, that is something that the women do use. Not all of them, but there are women that use them and find them valuable. There are issues with those too, in terms of, what's coming in, the quality of what's being put into the swaps, and then what that does in terms of stigma. And it does make a difference if your uniform doesn't look the same as everybody else's, or doesn't look as good as everybody else's. And there are issues around, what's included there. So the mum I spoke to yesterday said there wasn't much there, so she wasn't able to get, a lot of what she needed through the swap. So there are issues with that too, and the stigma thing is a part of that as well.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Donny. Peter, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Siobhan, for coming to committee this afternoon. Siobhan, I suspect that we would agree on about 95% of the bill. I'm going to ask you about some other aspects other than price and cost caps. You said in your evidence that the school uniform policy should address a mandatory requirement for gender-neutral options for school uniforms. Can you explain what gender-neutral options means?
Well, I know you've had evidence from some girls, certainly, in terms of the ability to wear trousers, and we definitely support that. We want to see school uniforms that are not only affordable, but comfortable and flexible and accommodating of pupils' needs, and that includes for pupils with special educational needs, and so that pupils can really choose what works for them, and it doesn't reinforce harms, and that includes to trans and gender non-conforming students. So we want pupils to be comfortable in school so that they can learn and take opportunities.
Yes. Okay. No, thank you for that, and certainly those things are important. In terms of gender neutral options, does that obviously, and in your evidence you've already alluded to it, that would involve girls having the right to wear trousers, and we've heard evidence around the reasons for that in terms of upskirting and periods. Would your evidence be that you would support then any boys who wish to wear skirts or summer dresses?
I suspect we're going to disagree on this.
You never know.
No, and we do want the school uniform to be flexible and have options for pupils. I think that it's important that children feel comfortable and they can learn at school, and that the options should be inclusive and provide for everybody.
Okay, I think I'll probably ask you that question again, because you didn't say whether or not you felt, because you've said it's a mandatory requirement here, whether or not you feel that given girls should be allowed to wear trousers, whether or not boys, and there may be an amendment come forward on this, whether boys should have the right to wear skirts or summer dresses to school in legislation.
I support the fact that the legislation should be inclusive for everybody.
And sorry, what does that mean in terms of boys who wish to wear skirts or dresses? Should they have a legislative right to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Could I then ask around any boys, and I'm not necessarily talking about students who perhaps have gender dysphoria, I'm just talking about boys because this committee has to consider these things. If an amendment came forward that would put into legislation the right for girls to wear trousers and boys to wear either skirts or summer dresses to school, in terms of those boys' rights, how would a school proceed if a boy who is wearing either a dress or a skirt or tunic wanted to use, for example, the girls' bathrooms in the school? Would they have a right to do that?
I could just to emphasise, you only put the member has the right to ask the question he chooses. You also have the right to keep your answers within the scope of the bill as far as you're comfortable. So that's entirely for you to make a decision how you want to respond.
Yes, I was primarily brought here to speak about the issue of cost, which is what my research is about and what the evidence that I have coming from the women is about. I don't hear stuff like this from the women that I speak to. They are concerned about cost and affordability and comfort in school, and that is the evidence I have. So that is the evidence I'm going to concentrate on.
I'm very glad you shared that, because that's certainly what the scope of the bill is, and it's certainly, I would agree 100% with what you just said. However, what we are seeing here, and clearly you have given evidence and it's your right obviously not to answer these, but this committee has to scrutinise this bill, and if we were to include your suggestion around mandatory requirements for gender neutral options, which includes the right of boys to wear skirts, tunics or summer dresses, it would not be the schools, and I see Danny across the table sort of shaking his head at me, it would not be for this committee to have to deal with that. It would be for principals and boards of governors and individual teachers to police how the school would interact with any boys who decided one day, as is their right if this was passed through legislation, to put on a tunic and perhaps want to access the girls' bathrooms for whatever reason. And that's why I'm asking you the question, because I do not think that is a ridiculous example. If legislation was passed that would underpin some of the evidence that you've given, because schools would have to deal with that, would you accept that?
And if I could,
just make a point here? I think there's a bit of a stretch here. You know, there's one thing about, and Peter seems to be obsessed with boys wearing skirts. I don't know what that's about, but it's a bit of a stretch to say they're going to wear skirts and then they're going to go into the girls' toilets. I'm not sure what that has to do with this.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chair. I was about to come in to say it again. It's the member's right to ask the question. However, I would want to put on record that no amendment has been discussed that has covered access to bathrooms over the course of this committee, and I think it's important to note that. Nor has it been suggested that if girls were permitted to wear trousers, that they would be seeking permission to use the boys' bathrooms. So again, I think it's important to note in terms of what the committee has discussed on this, but it is for you, Siobhan, to decide whether you wish to answer that specific question or not.
With all due respect to Peter for the question, I have evidence in relation to the affordability of school uniform, and I came here to speak about what I have heard back from the women that I spoke to over the course of our research. So I would like to keep it to that. Thank you.
No, Siobhan, and look, I completely accept that. And I
finish briefly as time.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Chair, so I'm on record supporting exactly what you said, and I suspect that actually the scope of this bill, and I remind committee members that actually the intent of the bill is to reduce costs for parents in Northern Ireland around school uniforms. I am concerned, and I will continue to scrutinise on this committee, what the outworking of any amendments which are brought forward to suggest gender neutral means, for example, boys wearing dresses to school, and what the outworking of that will be for schools in Northern Ireland, because that is this committee's job. It's not just to sign off something and think, well, that's okay. Suddenly there's a statutory right to do X and Y, because this committee will not have to deal with the consequences of that. The education department and teachers and boards of governors and principals will have to deal with the outworking of any legislation that passes through this committee. And I am concerned that suggestions around this area will have substantial implications for education in Northern Ireland in a whole host of ways.
Yeah, just to finish up, as time is against us, I think there'll be every opportunity at a clause by clause stage to go through every single possible.
Michelle, I'm not putting it on Facebook.
I feel like I'm getting into my time and probably coming in next, and I was waiting for a question that didn't come.
Michelle,
and I'm not
just
sure
if,
that was directed to
if I could just ask
Siobhan
Michelle just to direct any comments through the chair. I'm going to bring this section to a close, as well over time. You've had well over 5 minutes, and you'll have every opportunity to raise these issues, I'm sure, at another stage of the committee. Michelle, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. And Siobhan, thank you very much for coming today to give us the evidence that you have on affordability and the real situation and circumstances that many families are feeling in terms of affordability of school uniforms, and it's very much appreciated. So I'm going to ask you some questions related to that, which I think is why you're here. Do you believe that schools or the department should publish the costs of school uniforms?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's just being open and transparent about the costs that are involved, and I see no reason why that shouldn't be the case.
Thank you. In terms then of the cost cap, you did reference the cost cap area, and I think the Deputy Chair raised that there's some concerns about the practicalities of that at this stage, perhaps of implementing it. But do you think that the department should perhaps consult further on a cost cap so that we can maybe flesh out some of those issues?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. I think there are a lot of issues maybe around what affordability means, and in terms of whether that means different things to different people. So in terms of putting kind of some definition around affordability, and then asking some questions around what that means and what it should be set at, and then consulting further around how the cap might be put in place. Although I would say that families are desperate for help with school uniform costs. So I suppose I'm really saying two different things there. Then I want to see help directed towards families as soon as possible, because this has been an ongoing issue for so long. And then I'm supporting the consultation, which obviously would take a bit of time. But yes, I think it is worth some genuine consultation with all of those involved around how the cap might work, and around affordability in general and what it means. Because as I said, it can mean different things to different people.
Okay, thank you. And I know the Deputy Chair also raised then the alternative approach around branded items and how we might restrict the number of branded items. So just getting a sense of then what we think of as branded, would you support, and you use the example of the lady who just bought a regular cardigan, but an alternative might be that there would be a crest or something that could be sewn on or stitched on that would make things a bit more affordable, and to do that instead. Would that be something you would support?
Yes, I think we support anything that does help to genuinely reduce costs. So if it happened to be a requirement, that there needed to be a crest that could be sewn on. But again, I think we would support things that limit that kind of crest being on things, maybe one item of school uniform rather than on lots of things. And the research from or the polling done by Save the Children in Northern Ireland kind of showed strong support for generic school uniform items. So I think as much of the school uniform as possible that can be generic, so that it allows parents the choice and the ability to buy cheaper items. And if there must be branding that is kept to an absolute minimum, and where it does exist, things like a sewn-on badge could be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. And look, I'm not going to probably pull you over this again, but I just want to make a comment on the fact that I think you handled the question you received there on gender neutrality really well, in a very measured way. I think the evidence we've received, and if you want to comment on this you can, the evidence we've received has exclusively been about young women wearing trousers because women wear trousers. It's 2025. So I don't think that's something that is an extraordinary or ridiculous thing to suggest we might ask our schools to do. If you have anything you want to add, you're more than welcome to, but I don't require you to. I just wanted to thank you for your very measured evidence on that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And I do want to say that we are obviously very supportive of girls being able to wear trousers. And I did hear the evidence that you received from the girls in relation to that, and nothing more can add to the power of what was said there. The fact that girls should be able to wear trousers seems to be, in this day and age, very sensible.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Don't have any other indications? No, Sherry, you're not looking to come in? No, that's grand, and that'll bring our evidence session to a close. Siobhan, thank you for your time, and we will take all that forward in terms of our ongoing consideration of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes item 6 on the agenda, and we'll be factoring all of that evidence in. We have a Hansard record of that for ongoing committee consideration. So that will move us on then to item 7, or sorry, it is actually item 9 on the agenda. We did have a couple of other briefings scheduled, but unfortunately the two organisations in question weren't able to make it today to give oral evidence. They may follow up with written briefings for the committee. So that in fact takes us on to item 9 on the agenda. Do you know if that is a briefing from the Department of Education officials on the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill? Are the officials available and ready? I think they're joining us.
Margaret is, yeah.
Are they content to proceed, or shall we wait? We can cover another item if we need to wait for the second witness. Okay, that's fine. Let me just wait a moment. There, so we have both witnesses. Okay. So, item 9 on the agenda, members, as I've said, it's a briefing from the Department of Education officials in relation to the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill. The officials will be available to answer any questions arising from briefings and evidence that the committee has heard and any ongoing deliberations. So want to just welcome again Margaret Rose McNaughton, Director of Transport and Food in Schools at the Department of Education, and Shirley Sweeney, Head of School Uniform Policy Team at the Department of Education. Both witnesses joining us today by Zoom. So I'm happy to hand over to yourselves for any initial remarks you want to make, if there's any particular comments that you want to or information you want to put on record with the committee at this stage, and then we'll move into question and answer from there. So over to yourselves. Is it Margaret Rose, yourself first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything specific to say. I was other than to say I was listening to the evidence just there, and I mean very evident that there are people out there who are really struggling with the costs. So and it was very useful to actually hear the case study. But other than that, I have nothing further at the moment.
Thank you, Margaret Rose, and yeah, no, that it is good to hear those lived real examples of the impact of school uniform costs on parents. Well, I'll open up with questions then, and I suppose that the question that will be on all members' minds today is in terms of the guidelines. So we have discussed at length in relation to this bill and how it's structured, that it is really creating that duty on the department to create those guidelines that schools must adhere to, and until we see the guidelines we are a little in the dark, I suppose, as to what the department's intentions are in regard to what will be included and perhaps crucially not included. So that would be my first question. Is we had anticipated those guidelines. I think we'd had an assurance, in fact, they would be with us by the end of the week just past. Can you give us any insight into why guidelines haven't been provided and when we might expect to receive them?
Well, first I would say we have a fair amount of work to do yet on the guidelines, and we need to get some legal advice on just how far the guidelines go, that we are sure that we have covered all aspects of the bill, and we need to actually do a piece of work on just the practicalities of these guidelines. So we're going through each area line by line to see what does that actually look like in practice for the schools. So I do apologise, Chair. I did give you that assurance that the guidelines would issue, but unfortunately we're not in a position to do that. So, you know, my apologies for that.
Can I ask, has something changed in terms of the development of those guidelines? Because it had certainly been suggested, I think, that the guidelines were largely done, that they wouldn't depart that far from what was already in place. Is this in relation to, I mean, I suppose just to try and help us understand that, is this a direction from the Minister that something needs to change? Is it reflecting committee discussions? What's the factor at play here?
Well, it's the only factor at play with us. I suppose I was probably too optimistic in terms of when the guidelines would be available. We are aware that, having listened to many of the discussions within the committee, that there is likely to be, you know, a fair number of amendments. We don't know what those amendments are yet, but we are trying to, you know, go through the guidelines. They are based, as you rightly say, on the previous guidelines. The non-statutory guidelines, which we always said, you know, would form the basis of the statutory guidelines. So they're based on that, and they're based on the consultation responses. So we just simply are not at the point yet, you know, where we can have an assurance ourselves that these are in keeping with the bill as it is at the moment, and indeed are flexible, you know, that we can actually, you know, look then at the potential amendments, and all we have at the moment is just based on the committee discussions and discussions that we have had individually with the parties. So that's all we know about in terms of what the likely amendments are. So that's really where we're at this stage, and we really do need to get legal advice on these guidelines. Now, how long that will take, I mean, I couldn't give you any indication of the length of time that will take.
I mean, it would be the committee's intention to be as open and transparent with the department as possible in this process. I think it's in everybody's interest. We don't have any, we're on a tight, very, very tight timescale in terms of completing committee stage. There is an appetite, again, in keeping with the Minister's initial request to actually complete this before recess. The committee does have an appetite to deliver that, but that does reduce our time to actually have lengthy discussions around amendments. So none are agreed, but certainly as soon as any amendments are being agreed, I don't anticipate there'll be any issue with the committee sharing those with you. But there is a tight timescale at play here, which is making that more challenging. I suppose just to be very clear then, if the committee is of a mind, in keeping with the Minister's very clear direction of travel and request when he first contacted us about this bill, that he wanted this done by recess, and that there was actually an imperative to deliver that on that timescale. If the committee is doing its level best to deliver that, are we going to be in a scenario where we'll be producing a committee report without having had sight of the guidelines?
Well, recess is what, 2nd of July? I mean, that is highly possible, yes. I have to be honest with you. That is possible.
Do you think that's a desirable position for the committee to be in, when this is a piece of legislation that is all about what is in these guidelines? You know, we could be labouring away, developing amendments that aren't even required because we haven't seen what the department's intentions are.
Well, I mean, I do appreciate that, but our intentions were all set out in the policy document, the consultation document. So, I mean, we haven't deviated from that in any way, other than, as I said, to be mindful of the potential amendments that are coming along. And I'm just mindful of the previous committee discussion that we attended at the end of May, I think it was, where there was the issue of inclusivity. And, you know, we are considering or looking at that at this stage and wondering, well, what are the proposals around that? Because we will need to be very clear in any guidelines if there an amendment like that comes through, if that turns out to be another key principle. We need to be clear about what it is that actually means. We need to be really clear with schools what the implications are for schools. And you know what actually schools are going to have to do in terms of, now that's only one example. And you know, obviously we already have one amendment that we know about, that has come in from, I think it's an independent member, and we are anticipating other amendments as well. So that's where we're at.
And I'll finish with this question. I suppose I put on record first of all. I mean, I think if we don't have sight of the guidelines by the time we're agreeing a committee report, I think that would be deeply disappointing, I think, to all members of the committee. We'd had such clear assurance that that scenario was not going to arise, and it appears from your evidence today that that is precisely what we're looking at. The committee, I feel, has listened to the Minister who asked us to work harder. Those were his words in the chamber. But it appears that we're not being met halfway on that, and that is a disappointment. But that said, are we looking at a scenario? You've been very, very clear about the need to work to a timeline around the November prospectus publication for schools. There does seem to have been maybe a lack of anticipation in the department that this bill would be amended at all, or certainly amended substantively. If there are substantive amendments coming through, does that impact your ability to deliver guidelines on time for schools? And again, we still don't have a date of when you need those guidelines to be with schools. And again, I would like clarity on that also.
Okay. Well, first of all, can I say that if there are a number of amendments come through, of course, when we get to consideration stage, it is going to take a lot of work to get the guidelines to reflect what's in the bill, because that is, what we need to do. The guidelines must reflect what's in the bill. We do have in clause 1.4 the ability to include transitory guidelines. So, we know what the very basis of this bill is. It's about affordability. The proposals were clear about issues such as single supplier and about branded items. So we still have the ability to get transitory guidance out to schools, and that would be pending then the work that we need to do on other issues that come in that need to be reflected in the guidelines. So we are still absolutely working to ensure that schools are clear before they develop their prospectus, because a parent needs to know what the school uniform requirements are before they apply for a school.
Okay, well, look, I will leave it at that. I'll bring in the Deputy Chair if you want to come in, and then open up to other members.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Margaret Rose. It's clear we're not going to get any guidelines until yourselves and the Minister has seen any amendments. And you said you were anticipating amendments. You shouldn't have had to anticipate anything. If you had have asked, I'd have been more than happy to provide you with the amendments that we're bringing forward.
Well, apologies, I wasn't aware that was even possible as part of the process. We did meet with all of the parties, and we did say that we would be more than happy to talk to people about any potential amendments that they have, and that's still the case. And that would be very helpful. But and even now, I'm more than happy to meet to discuss any potential amendments.
I can assure you of one thing: none of the amendments we're bringing forward have anything to do with Peter's obsession about boys wearing skirts, or even now summer dresses as well. So there'll be nothing about that in them. If that'll help you to formulate your guidelines.
There's a number of other issues, I have to say, that we really need to be clear on. When we're writing these guidelines, we have to look at it from the perspective of the school leaders and what it means for them in terms of how do they practically bring this into being. It's easy, I suppose, to say, right, you can only have one single supplier, or you should not have one single supplier, sorry. But we need to go further than that and say, but there could be times when that might be the best or most suitable option for that school, depending on where that school is.
Sorry to cut across you, Margaret Rose, because I've only a limited time here, and I just want to ask you a last question. I'd prefer to see all the guidelines at the one time when they're ready. But in any event, just for clarity, have you been instructed by anyone in the department or the Minister himself not to provide the guidelines to the committee until they have sight of all the amendments?
Oh, no, we haven't been.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Danny, you indicated that.
Thank you, Chair. And Margaret, I suppose a lot of the points have been already made by members. I just want to just put on record my disappointment. It was, it was heavily put to us that the guidelines will cover a lot of what has been raised in committee. And I would be of the view the more we put in primary legislation, the better. And I think that just convinced me today that we do need to put more amendments in and make sure it's in primary legislation, because it is very disappointing that the guidelines aren't with us. And it was only a matter of weeks ago that it was promised that it would be the end of last week. I don't know what's happened. I'm suspecting that something has happened for the reason for it not to be in front of us, and I don't think it's good enough. But thank you for the work you're doing. I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you, Danny. Other members? Michelle?
Yep. Thanks, folks, for the evidence today. I mean, as Danny has said, most of the key questions have been asked. I just wanted to ask why we're only seeking legal advice now. Would that not be something you perhaps would have anticipated requiring before this stage, if it's going to hold everything up in an indefinite period?
Shirley, do you want to?
Yes, we
Yeah,
have.
sorry.
Sorry, we have
Go ahead.
sought legal advice throughout the process, but what we need to do, Michelle, is what we're trying to do is to address the chair's point, about getting these guidelines to schools in a timely fashion to allow for their prospectus information to be published, for the clarity for parents that Margaret Rose referred to. So that's why we're looking at a draft set of guidelines that we know will be amended. We know that there will be amendments coming. We've always known that. So it wasn't that we were ever drafting guidelines thinking they would be the finished article with a small tweak here or there. But we want to get legal advice on those now, because the difference between non-statute guidance and statute guidance is quite significant in terms of every word could have a specific impact for schools that we need to have thought through. And we need to make sure, and committee has raised this a number of times with us, that it's not left to schools' interpretation, or that schools aren't left unclear in terms of what is being required of them. So the wording, etc., we need to get to a sort of a final draft for now in terms of the bill as introduced, knowing that that will be changed, but to understand the basic language that we're using, the basic requirements for putting on schools. So it has to be at a finalised enough state for now, for our lawyers to be able to look at that, for the departmental solicitor's office to be able to look at that and formulate a view. If this is the way that these are written, with whatever changes we need to add into them, and we know those will be needed, what does that mean for schools? Is there anything that we should reword or that could be open to interpretation? So it does just need to be at a reasonable state to be shared with the DSO.
Okay, and in terms then of what you currently have in terms of your draft guidance, I mean, I think it would be helpful for the committee to see that. We understand it's a work in progress, but we're kind of flying blind here. It would be great to have something, and we did get an indication that we would have something. So, I mean, I don't think anybody would be concerned if we got some kind of draft through, just to help us with our scrutiny and give even schools as well just some sense of what's coming down the track.
But I think that is an important point, that schools need to be aware of what's coming down the track. And we have tried, in the past to make them aware, and I go back again to the letter that issued last September. That letter was quite clear, I think, on what was coming down the track. And indeed, many schools have actually taken that on board and have started to change their uniforms. And it was really good to hear about the Craigavon school, and we're aware of other schools that are changing uniforms now. So the one thing I suppose that does that is bothering us at the moment is the practicality of all of the issues, and we're trying to just work through all of those practicalities to make sure that we are not putting something else onto schools that they can't deliver actually, or that isn't actually in keeping with the bill. And that, I suppose, is our biggest concern at the moment, that anything that we're writing in the guidelines has to be in keeping with the bill, and because these are going to be statutory and schools will have to follow them.
Okay. I mean, the impression I think we're getting strongly is that the concern for the department, or it's causing, I guess, a change of timing or direction on your attitude through this the whole way through has been quite matter of fact. This is all great, schools know this is common. There hasn't been any concern really, or any sense of concern on our part that we wouldn't see guidelines. It seems to be some of the inclusion stuff that is causing people to feel a little more spooked around this. So we've had evidence consistently throughout this process. We had school kids here, we've had a range of organisations, pretty consistently almost all the evidence we've got has been very matter of fact about some of the inclusion stuff around, excuse my phone, trousers, for example, which is, I guess, just not a controversial thing in 2025. Is that what the issue is here?
No, I just used inclusion as an example, because that was what had been talked about at the previous meeting. It is actually, when we look at the guidelines as we have them at the moment, we look at every line to see, well, what does that actually mean for schools? And we do have, we have some issues around how schools could actually implement that, because whatever guidelines goes out there, schools will have to implement them.
I mean, boys wear trousers, right? Now, sorry to interrupt, but
no, sorry,
I
don't mean about wearing.
Not hard to implement that. I think that's the main point that seems to be coming through here, even from the question from some of my colleagues, that the idea of girls wearing trousers seems to be what's caused some kind of derailing of this process.
No, absolutely. I can assure you, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But probably wasn't a good example to use, but it was just the one that was, most recently discussed at our previous committee meeting. But that is absolutely not the reason for it at all.
Yeah, because I say, even if I look back at the consultation report that the department issued, it just raises this issue as well. It's in there. Like, none of this is a surprise. So I just hope that that is not something that is holding up this process, because of course the timeframes and the need to get this done with urgency was impressed upon us. So it just feels very strange that suddenly, after weeks of this kind of questioning and evidence, and I guess some of the questions that are coming forward from the committee members, that all of a sudden we're not going to get our guidance and we have to get legal advice. It just feels to us a little bit unusual.
If I could just a brief response, Margaret, and that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I do accept that I was probably over optimistic, and I hold my hands up in that respect. We are genuinely trying to be as open as we can. We are basing our guidelines on those issues that are in our consultation proposals, but being very mindful of the potential for other amendments. But we really need to get our legal cover on these guidelines first, before they would go anywhere. There is, we could put something into the guidelines that actually would really be difficult for schools, and not just schools, potentially for parents as well. And that's why we need to be absolutely clear on where we are, just even on the basics of what we have in our proposals at the moment, setting aside even what any potential amendments might be.
Listen, thank you very much for Margaret, and I wouldn't be so rude as to tell you to work harder, because I know how that feels, so I'll let you get on with it.
Any other indications from any other members? There's a couple of other points I wanted to raise, and look, I think we've covered the issues around the guidelines in a fair bit of detail, and I think that the committee feeling on that issue is clear. I wanted to ask just a couple of things. I'm going to revisit something from the last time you were here, and one of the things that the committee has been looking at is as to whether or not there is any need to look at the date at which guidance needs to be provided to schools, and whether that needs to be in any way provided for on the face of the bill. Didn't get an answer last time I asked it, and I'm really, this is a question to help me understand the timescales we are operating on and when really all of this needs to come into effect. Are we any clearer on what the latest date that you can propose to committee is that these guidelines would need to be with schools to have effect for the writing of the prospectuses in late 2025?
Okay, Shirley, can I ask you to work back from the
and I know we went through
Yes,
the admissions process and all of that last time. I suppose
Yes.
the reason to give context to the reason I'm asking, that there has been a significant amount of attention given to just how urgent it was to complete committee stage so that that could be done. So I suppose it's just for us to understand, is there a date at which this is going to land at the latest? What's the latest possible date it can land with schools so that this will take effect on that time scale that we know the Minister seeks to operate on?
So what we're planning to do, Chair, is not to go back over things that we've repeated, but we hope to write to schools again to update them before the end of term, ideally. Then we know that once consideration stage and further consideration stage happen, we will see what the final shape of the bill is. Final stage, obviously, it will be voted through or not. It won't be amended further. So at that point, we will be able to finalise the guidelines. That, as I said, is the reason that we are trying to work on these draft guidelines and the wording. Those issues around the wording are coming through more clearly to us now, but getting those tested with DSO. So we've been working to the earliest point that we can communicate with schools as opposed to the latest stage by which they need those. I think the issue for prospectus is that there should be no commitment given by schools or requirement placed in the prospectus by schools that would sit outside the requirements of the bill in terms of affordability, branded items, consultation with parents, pupils, all of those things. So we would be aiming to write to schools as early as possible, even before the royal assent is given, because whilst this guidelines won't be statutory at that point, they will set out what is known to be coming in as statutory.
Right, just to interrupt, because I don't want to go around in circles on this. I suppose really I'm looking at, we are hoping, based on what the Minister has said, he was clear that there would be consideration stage would run as soon after the Assembly sits again in September as is possible, that he'd be looking to get that on the order paper as quickly as is possible. Further stages there then to complete. When we hit final stage, I'm just trying to get a sense from you, what is the latest date that guidelines can be with schools so that they can be reflected in prospectuses? And I understand that there's lots of things in the mix there, but it's really for us to understand at what point is this going to take effect. Are we still on track for this to be done, to be in for November prospectuses? Or is the complications and the difficulties that the department's articulating here around creating guidelines going to push this forward? Because the Minister was clear that that could not be countenanced as an outcome. So I want to know, what's the date? What's the date schools need this by?
It won't be, Chair. I mean, I would say
so just again,
October,
it's the date.
Ideally.
What's the date? What's the date that schools need this by?
Well, depending on scheduling, hopefully October.
October.
But
Okay.
the thing is, that's what Margaret Rose was talking about. We're looking to see, because there are so many permutations, if there's a number of amendments and those draw out some complications that we require to take more time on our legal advice on, we will put in place transitory guidelines. There will be, where the bill gives us the powers to provide those guidelines so that there will be an impact, there will be effect for admissions for September 26. So what you're describing there, you're right, the Minister has been very clear that this has to have effect, so it will have effect, and we are working on every contingency plan that we need to ensure that happens.
I maintain, obviously, that the schools are probably under no legal obligation to do anything till it has royal assent, but that is by the by. But I suppose if the committee were minded to put a date on the face of the bill of the first date by which guidelines must be provided to schools, would you have a date? I mean, it's got of October possibly, but pinned down.
Yes, but again, that's dependent on when final stage. Okay. And again, just thinking this through, I think that would probably be a point for legal advice, because you're correct, the bill itself doesn't come into operation until it gains royal assent. Mm-hmm. We're talking about advising schools of what will be the requirements for their admissions process for September 26 prior to it becoming legal, but it will be legal for that time, so as to keep that, make sure that everyone is in line with what will be the act, if that makes sense.
Still, I mean, I hope it doesn't come across that I'm trying to be awkward. I think I'm really interested to know, because we are concerned about how will schools manage this. So when will they need to know? But we'll leave it there. One last question for me, and it is just particularly on clause 3, so that to get a sense on that. That's one of those clauses that is an enabling power. It's not going to come into effect at the point this gains royal assent, acquires royal assent. Limiting branded items. In terms of the department and bringing forward guidelines on this, we have heard evidence around the cost cap, and we've heard from the CMA, we've heard from yourselves around some of the concerns around that. Committee has taken that into account. If we were to bring forward something which would look at, okay, a much more maybe practical, straightforward intervention would be the limiting of branded items, bring us in line with what looks like is going to be delivered in England. Is that something that the department would be able to activate fairly quickly in terms of guidelines?
Sorry, go ahead, Shirley.
Sorry, just to be clear, Chair, you're talking about that coming in under a commencement order?
Yes.
Provision.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so the commencement order provision is pretty straightforward, and doesn't necessarily take it's not a lengthy process.
But if
unlike-
the committee was to look at, or at any stage, consideration stage, we had an amendment which brought that into effect now, that a limit would be placed on numbers of branded items. Is that something that could be delivered? Are you in a state of preparedness for that if that were to happen?
Well, I think the challenge for that is that England it's at the House of Lords committee stage currently, the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and we've seen through some of the debates around those provisions where they're specifying on the face of primary legislation, it's, as you know, 3 and 4, depending on whether it's primary or post-primary. There are still concerns expressed around the cost of those individual items and the unintended consequences around that. So we will have no evidence to draw on in terms of what works or doesn't work. So I suppose it's that balance of whether committee is thinking of something explicit on the face of the bill, or something to go immediately into guidelines. That is probably challenging because there's no. It's going to be a little bit of trial and error potentially, in which case having something in the guidelines allows a bit more agility.
Can you appreciate, and I appreciate I've taken up additional time here, but I think this is important to inform our discussions around this. I think that the challenge the committee is facing at the moment is that we are starting to look at some of those alternative mechanisms that could be used, because we don't know what you're going to be asking schools to adhere to, because we haven't seen the guidelines, and we're kind of circling back to that challenge. That there's concern. We're hearing the evidence we've heard really clearly from stakeholders is that they want a really clear indication of how this is going to impact cost. And because we don't know exactly what's going to be in those guidelines, it does perhaps lead you down tracks to think, well, do we need to do something more interventionist on that basis? So it possibly takes us back to the beginning of our discussion.
Could I just make one comment on the capping the number of branded items? I mean, one concern that I would have with that is if a school was allowed to have, say, 3 branded items, it could still have a very expensive blazer with a crest on it. That and obviously that would add to the costs. Although setting aside that, then they have to then look at the overall costs. But we will look at what obviously is happening in England, and it looks like that that's what's going ahead. But that's just one concern I have, is that you could have 3 branded items which are very expensive.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. We'll have some reflections on some of that in our discussion then in the next item of the agenda. Look, thank you for your attendance today. Can I check? Will there be scope for you to attend next week if we need to pick up any further issues?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And can I just make the point as well, Chair, that it was not in our intention not to be able to come to appear last week. I mean, my understanding, and this was probably again my fault, my understanding was that we would be given a wee bit of notice about when to come, and I had another appointment that I really couldn't get out of last Wednesday afternoon, which is why we weren't at the committee. But if we know now that it is every week, then certainly we will make that provision.
Well, certainly apologies from my side if any of that wasn't clear, and we certainly wouldn't want to be, creating a scenario where there's uncertainty around that. So apologies if that was the case. I think just given how tight our timescales are, I think the more opportunities we have to engage, I think the better at this stage. But apologies if there has been a misunderstanding there. Okay. Well, I don't think there's anything further being indicated, so we'll bring that item to a close. And thank you both for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think the next item that probably we're going to be discussing the uniforms bill in more detail now, and we can carry forward any of that into the next part of our discussion. So that is item 10 in the agenda, and that will initially be an oral briefing from the Bill Office in relation to the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill. I'm going to suggest to members that items 10 and 11 be taken in closed session so that we can have a full and open discussion around the current state of play around our thinking on the bill and any potential amendments to that. So are members agreed to move into closed session? Agreed.
Take a wee while, Chair. Could we have a comfort break?
Yes, we'll certainly have a comfort break. We'll turn.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Okay, members, so that is us back into open session. So just to review for items 10 and 11 on the agenda, which were conducted in closed session, we had a briefing from the Bill Clerk where the Bill Clerk was able to brief committee members on some amendments that had already been drafted at their committee's request, and then we had an informal consideration of the bill clause by clause. It was agreed that a number of items would be followed up with the department for some clarifications around intent behind some of the clauses and potentially intent in relation to final inclusion in the guidelines, and also an agreement to share some potential themes for amendment with the department at this stage where there is at least openness to consideration, if not full agreement from the committee on all items. So that moves us on to clause 12 and to item 12 on the agenda. Apologies, I'm still in the bill, which is correspondence. So I'd refer members to pages 63 to 89 of the packs. We have 9 items under correspondence, and then we have some items which were tabled as well. Summary note at page 63, and hopefully we can work through those. I will just summarise the ones that require a decision or a direction from committee or a discussion. Other than that, it will be as per the summary note. So item 12.3, page 66, it's correspondence from Gambling with Lives, seeking to brief the committee on its Chapter 1 initiative, and there was a really positive event in the Assembly in relation to that and some great resources. I would be very content to propose that we have an informal briefing with Gambling with Lives on those resources they provide for schools, potentially after summer recess if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 12.4, page 67, correspondence from the convener of the Scottish Education, Children and Young People's Committee, proposing that the committees across the devolved bodies cooperate on areas of shared interest. Our members content that we engage with the Scottish Education, Children and Young People Committee on matters of common interest, likely to be myself and Deputy Chair. Yeah, agreed. Item 12.7, page 72, correspondence from Unite the Union regarding classroom assistance and working practices, particularly around the temporary engagement of classroom assistants. I would like to suggest on this that we seek, and it is going to be after recess, but seek a formal briefing from the Education Authority around classroom assistant recruitment and engagement practices, but with a particular focus on SEN, because there's some of the stats around the numbers of these assistants who are employed to support SEN learners who are on temporary engagement contracts still, seemingly after having completed 4 years of employment. Again, I think does bear some scrutiny, but also just to hear from the Education Authority around proposed reforms of the classroom assistant role and how they are engaged potentially in terms of job descriptions and reviews of those roles and pay structures. If members are agreed with that, we can seek that for after recess if we are agreed.
Agreed.
Item 12.8, page 78, correspondence from the Education Authority. It's an update on the 25-26 application process for free school meals and school uniform clothing allowances. So it's not a very substantive piece of correspondence, but I would suggest that we include that in the bill report, as I think it was submitted on that basis. Danny, you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. It's just a wee point around the statistics of the free school meal uptake, and it sits around 80%. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, stigmatisation. But I was wondering, could we rate as a committee to the AFC to see what work, if any, has been carried out on auto enrolment?
I'd be very happy to support that. It's an issue I've raised multiple times, and we've never had a huge amount of clarity. There's work going on in the background, but it would be certainly, I think, an update would absolutely be an appropriate time to do that. So we'd be including the EA correspondence in the bill papers and in the bill papers that are available to members, and then also that letter seeking an update from DFC and potentially from the Department of Education as well to get a sense. Are members agreed? Great. Item 12.10, page 89, correspondence from Ulster University seeking to meet the committee. It's a report they've produced on the implications and challenges and opportunities arising from generative AI in schools in Northern Ireland. I'd be happy, this has been an area I think of emerging interest. I'd be happy to propose a briefing, be happy to take a steer from members whether they would like that to be written, informal or formal at this stage. Any views?
It'll be after the recess again, wouldn't it?
Be after recess, yeah. That's.
I mean, I wouldn't mind if it was an in-person briefing.
Yeah, an in-person briefing, it would be. Agreement on that? Okay, agreed. Item 12.11, then just raising these as they were tabled and don't appear in the summary note. Item 12.11, letter from the Department on the curriculum-led capital investment programme. I want to propose that we note. Members are agreed.
Agreed.
Item 12.12, it's letter from the EA Director of Operations and Estates on the school uniforms bill. Again, not a substantive piece of correspondence, and just propose we add that to the bill papers if members are agreed. Then we have item 12.13, it's the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission submission to the uniforms bill consultation from September of last year. Again, propose we add that to the bill papers. We agreed. And finally, item 12.14, item from an invite from the NAHT to an early years and preschool event they're holding on the 16th of June. They're launching a report around their areas of priority for that, or policy for policy development. Certainly would want members to note that. Myself and the Deputy Chair sponsoring it, and so I think it would be one of interest to all committee members, so it'd be great to see you all there. Other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 63? Great. Item 13, forward work programme, and that's a draft programme is there for you at page 93. So I'm going to just summarise this very briefly. I'm not sure if there's a huge amount we need to cover in this. It is largely school uniform based. I would just draw members' attention to there are a couple of briefing sessions which are school uniform bill related that are not on our normal committee time, so please do note those, and you should have had hopefully diary invites through for those, so those are sessions we will require quorum at, so draw attention to that. And also just that we do have 2 additional briefings in, not on the school uniform bill, one from Lucy Crane on the curriculum review, and one from the EA around placements. I think we're going to maybe reserve flexibility on the EA one if we think that based on our discussions next week, if we think we need longer in the meeting they're scheduled for, so we'll keep that under review. But other than that, is there anything anybody wants to add? Clerk, if you feel there's anything particularly to highlight on that?
Just the Tuesday morning is Matthew Easter, Chair of the Schoolwear Association, and then there's a Tuesday afternoon meeting as well.
Legal advice and research input. So just to make sure members do note those as they're outside of normal time. That's great. Okay, are we happy to endorse the forward work plan as drafted? Great. Item 14, any other business? Is there any?
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, just raising with the Deputy Chair, I mean, he said earlier that I had, I'm not sure exactly what his comments were, but some sort of obsession with boys in skirts. I don't particularly think that's appropriate. I certainly wouldn't make those comments. I see everyone smiling across the way at me again. I wouldn't make those comments to another member of this committee. I'd ask him to reflect on that. I know him well. I know he didn't mean any malice with them, but I just don't think that's appropriate. I want to put that on the record, and I also want to put on the record that if I'm scrutinising witnesses before this committee, it's because I'm looking at what the intent of this bill is and what the consequences of us pushing forward legislation in terms of the impact that's going to have on schools. I don't think I've ever put up, in relation to what Michelle referenced, I don't think I've ever put up a single Facebook post on, a snapshot of this committee in terms of videos or bites for TikTok or Instagram. That's not why I'm here, and I don't do that. And she's welcome to have a look at my Facebook posts over the last 9 months. I'm serious about scrutiny. I'm not, I don't scrutinise witnesses for hits in the newspaper or for social media hits. I scrutinise witnesses because that's our job. The questions I ask may not be pleasant for other members of the committee. I'm not going to sit here and just nod through witnesses because that's the easiest thing in the world to do. A witness comes here, it's about scrutiny. I think what the Deputy Chair said was, in my view, inappropriate. It's certainly not language I would use to any other committee member. I was sad that Danny and Michelle thought it was funny. I didn't think it was funny. I'm going to park it there. It's not going to affect our working relationship, Pat, but I want to make those comments and put them on the record.
Okay. Appropriate to give the Deputy Chair opportunity to respond.
Well, let me say it wasn't intended in any way to be malicious, and you're right about that. And it was intended to bring a bit of humour to the proceedings. So I apologise if you were offended, Pat.
Okay, well, probably just from my perspective as Chair, it never hurts to have a reminder that we should ensure that we conduct our business respectfully here in terms of being respectful to each other as members. And we are inevitably going to disagree on issues, but we should conduct those conversations respectively, and that's appropriate to note that. And I think just perhaps for future meetings we should all just bear that in mind in terms of how we conduct our business. So happy to conclude it there, Peter, if you're content.
Yeah, sure.
Item 15, date, time and place of next meeting. So that is in fact Tuesday the 17th of June, and that's a 9:15 briefing, and that's again here in room 29, and that's all detailed on the forward work programme for members. So on that basis I'll put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.